Please silence all electronic devices at this time. At no time, please do not approach the dais. If you have any questions, please raise your hand, and one of us, the Sergeant at Arms, will kindly assist you. Chair, we're ready to begin.
Good afternoon. My name is Councilmember Lincoln Ressler. I have the privilege of chairing the Committee on Governmental Operations, State and Federal Legislation. Try to say that 10 times fast. And I would like to welcome all of you who've joined us today, including my colleagues, Councilmembers Brewer and Carr and Gennaro, and of course, the public advocate, Mr. Jumaane Williams. At today's hearing, the committee will be conducting oversight on the mayor's new elected official engagement form. As elected officials, our top responsibility is serving our constituents. Collectively, we help tens of thousands of individual New Yorkers every single day. My office serves hundreds of Brooklynites every week. We accept walk-ins at our office, answer telephone calls and emails, attend community meetings, and support constituents as we encounter them on the street, around our community, when I'm buying groceries, whenever we can. No matter how we hear about an issue, our goal is to respond and help New Yorkers navigate the labyrinth of city government. Much of this work requires partnering closely with city agencies. We meet regularly with agency heads, borough commissioners, deputy commissioners, and other agency staff to discuss issues and strategize on how we can work together to improve the lives of New Yorkers. Some of the best solutions come out of these very meetings. When we're able to share direct feedback with agencies on how certain policies and operations are being enacted on the ground, we can work together to troubleshoot and find ways to improve outcomes for all New Yorkers. Simply put, this is the job all of us were elected to do, to be problem solvers, to be the voice of our constituents in front of city government. On April 10th, that all changed. Without any notice, or our requests for assistance were denied. Instead, we were told to fill out a form and wait. I asked the parks and health departments to address unsafe lead levels in a park. I was told to fill out a form and wait. My colleagues' requests for meetings about illegal dumping, a cannabis store near an elementary school, requests for agency representatives to attend community events, from job fairs to mental health forums, were all met with the very same response: fill out a form and wait. This is the opposite of efficiency. This is the opposite of get stuff done. This is how nothing gets done. And it is in direct conflict with the city charter. Based on the feedback we have received from colleagues, council members meet with senior leaders at city agencies an average of about 4 times a week, sometimes more, if you ask Councilmember Brewer. There are over 160 elected officials representing New York City at the city, state, and federal levels of government, and they are each engaging city agencies every single day. If 160 elected officials are sending one form request each day, and if the mayor is serious when he says he's reviewing every single one, that means no city agency will act on any issues from elected officials until the mayor has personally read hundreds of forms daily. If the mayor spends a minute reviewing every form and emailing an agency, that is over 2 hours every day. If that's what Mayor Adams plans to do all day, not only will our constituents' concerns be bogged down in a pointless, needless delay, the mayor would have less time to do his actual job. The mayor has already admitted what was clear from the start. This has nothing to do with efficiency. It's about preventing elected officials who question or criticize his administration from doing our jobs. City agencies are filled with hard-working policy experts. They are charter mandated to work with elected officials to solve problems. This is a dangerous politicization of city government to prevent city agencies from doing their job based on the political whims of the mayor. There are real issues facing our city that require leadership and the mayor's focused attention. 2 million New Yorkers and 1 in 4 children in our city are living in poverty. 1 in 3 tenants spend half their income on rent every month. 120,000 people are sleeping in the shelters tonight. These are the issues the mayor should be focused on, not politicizing our city agencies. Elected officials across all branches of government are baffled by this process. We sent a letter today to the mayor that was signed by 65 elected officials representing the people of New York City at the city, state, and federal levels, requesting that the mayor reverse this policy immediately. I've spoken with over a dozen former deputy mayors and commissioners who cannot understand how city government leaders are able to do their jobs with this inane policy in place. Adams administration representatives, deputy mayors, commissioners, and other senior agency personnel continue to call elected officials like us daily and request meetings with us because they rely on us to secure community support, additional funding, and vital feedback on the projects that they are advancing. I look forward to hearing from Tiffany Raspberry, the senior advisor to the mayor and Director of Intergovernmental and External Affairs about why this new procedure is in fact necessary and how exactly it will improve transparency, communication, and efficiency between city, state, and federal elected officials and the Adams administration. With that, I would like to thank our committee counsel, Jayshree Ganapathy and Erica Cohen from Central Staff for their hard work in putting this hearing together, and I especially like to thank my brilliant Chief of Staff, Molly Haley, for her hard work on this as well. I don't think we've been joined by any additional members of the council. Oh, we have Councilmember Schulman online. Thank you for joining us. Before we hear from the administration, I'd like to turn it over to our public advocate, Jumaane Williams, for opening remarks.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. As I mentioned, my name is Jumaane Williams. I'm the public advocate of the City of New York. I want to thank Chair Ressler and the members of the Committee on Government and Oversight, State and Federal Legislation for holding this critically important hearing and allowing me the opportunity to make a statement. The administration's recent policy to require elected officials in city, state, and federal office to seemingly seek approval from City Hall for meetings with agency commissioners and their executive teams is troubling, to say the least, and all the pushback is truly understandable, and I hope that the administration is listening. This policy, as was designed and presented, will stymie vital interaction between government partners, preventing public service on behalf of New Yorkers in order to service the administration's seeming need to exert further control over all government operations. Furthermore, it will set a dangerous precedent limiting follow-up and oversight as related to hearings. My colleagues on the council know how often commissioners need to get back to them on certain questions and issues. Quote, unquote, completed this form does not result in a guarantee of a meeting or appearance. With the administration's reserved right to decline any requests, I am concerned this policy is simply the latest in a wave of policies curtailing agency transparency. It is possible that serious issues in need of investigation, correction, and certainly public spotlighting may never see the light of day, denied by the mayor's office for any number of reasons. This is not the way to make government work for New Yorkers. And if the purpose of this is to make sure there's a trail of who's asking for what, that seems to be the functions of what government relations people would do. And I would recommend that the people who are getting the request be the ones that have to submit to a central repository, not elected officials who are elected specifically to provide oversight for their constituents. I was happy to learn that these forms are subject to our city's open data law, mandating public release and storage of municipal data. However, this policy should not exist, plain and simple. For offices like that of the public advocate, which exists outside the purview of the office of the mayor, this policy is a significant overreach. It would affect my office's ability to comply with our charter-mandated responsibilities. And as an ex-officio member of the council, I feel compelled to add it. It would also limit council members' ability to work collaboratively with agency partners and deliver results for their constituents. As I was once name-checked in a press conference, I do want to point out there's a difference between my other offices having a forum for constituents to try to make appointments than elected officials who are elected by our constituents to provide an oversight function to routinely meet with agencies. I'd also like to suggest that if there's an issue, as was now being pushed, of gathering information, conversations before something like this is put out may help everyone in figuring out what the issue really is and how we could address it. Everyone here are partners in government. Hopefully moving forward, we can have those conversations before these things are put into place, not after. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Public Advocate. During the hearing, I will be calling on panelists to testify. I'd like to remind everyone who is testifying via Zoom that you will be on mute until you are called on to testify, at which point you will be unmuted by the host. For those of you who are testifying in person, be sure to sign up with the Sergeant of Arms in the back, even if you're registered in advance. We will now call representatives of the administration to testify. We will be hearing today again from Ms. Tiffany Raspberry, Senior Advisor to the Mayor and Director of Intergovernmental and External Affairs. This time, I'll call on the committee counsel to administer the oath.
Thank you, Councilmember Chair Ressler. I'll call on Tiffany Raspberry. Do you affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth before this committee and respond honestly to council member questions? Yes, I do. Thank you. Chair Ressler.
Thanks. I'd like to invite you to prepare your testimony, and thank you for modifying your schedule to be with us today.
My name is Tiffany Raspberry. Oh, I guess I wasn't being recorded. Let me start over again. Good afternoon, Chair Ressler, Public Advocate Williams, and members of the Committee on Government Operations, State and Federal Legislation. My name is Tiffany Raspberry, and I am the Director of Intergovernmental and External Affairs for the Mayor's Office. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to address the newly implemented operational protocol, specifically known as the Elected Official Engagement Request Form. The form is aimed at ensuring efficient and equitable engagement amongst elected officials and agency commissioners and executive directors. This protocol not only facilitates coordinations with our agency leadership, but also ensures the efficient allocation of city resources. I want to start by thanking all of you who have already utilized this form to engage with our city agencies, and also emphasize that every level of government, federal, state, and city, are utilizing it. Examples of appropriate engagement requests include meetings with commissioners or executive directors, meetings with senior level agency staff, requests to either tour districts, attend events, attend task force meetings, requests for taking part in interagency meetings, and requests to discuss enforcement, amongst others. The form is not intended to stand in the way of elected officials picking up the phone to reach out to a commissioner, borough commissioner, or any other official in the administration. I still encourage you all to continue to do just that. Rather, it's to request formal meetings or a deployment of agency resources outside of an emergency response so that we can make sure we are connecting with and serving all of our government partners as efficiently and effectively as possible. While we are still early in the process, we have already seen how this new system serves as a one-stop shop for elected officials to easily access every agency, regardless of whether or not they have specific contact information or individuals in those agencies. I would also like to make clear that this does not apply to inquiries for constituent cases, basic requests for information, general outreach regarding emergency issues, or standard project or informational updates that fall outside of formal briefings. Instead, this form should be used for formal meeting requests with agency leadership and for the deployment of agency resources. For inquiries related to constituent cases, elected officials should feel free to contact the most appropriate agency contact, including agency leadership, as well as your partners here at City Hall, including myself, those on my team, or one of my colleagues for a response and attention to any matters. One of the key objectives of this protocol is to mitigate disparities in accessing among elected officials. While many elected officials know agency leadership or intergovernmental staff, there are many newly elected officials who may not have those contacts. This process seeks to prevent situations where certain elected officials have greater access than others, thereby fostering a level playing field for engagement. Additionally, it aims to streamline inquiries by consolidating issues raised by multiple officials into cohesive meetings, enhancing the administration's responsiveness and effectiveness. After clicking on the link, you will be directed to complete a brief questionnaire, which will allow the administration to enhance collaboration and streamline the delivery of services to our city. It also helps to ensure that the administration avoids duplicative efforts as we work toward our shared goals for the city. As of this morning, we have received a total of 182 requests through the form, and all have received a response. Of that, we received 51 requests from City Council members representing 23 different offices. It is important to acknowledge that no request has been denied, and the average turnaround time for approvals stands at 24 to 48 hours. Again, it is crucial to emphasize that in cases of emergencies or urgent matters, the Adams administration remains fully committed to promptly addressing issues without use of this form. Elected officials are not required to fill out the form for such matters, and our team stands ready to respond swiftly and effectively to any emergency situations. Likewise, again, I want to stress how the form is not for constituent cases and how those inquiries are not required to go through this process. I am optimistic about the continued collaboration between the Mayor's Office and the City Council, and I look forward to our ongoing efforts to serve the people of the City of New York. Thank you for your time and interest in this matter.
Great. Thank you so much for your testimony. I'd like to acknowledge my colleagues, Councilmember Vernikov, Councilmember Palladino, and Councilmember Gutierrez. Thank you for joining us today. I'd like to start with a few questions on a few topics, and then I'll pass it over to my colleagues. I'll just begin with a yes or no question. I just want to affirm your testimony. You've denied 0 requests to date.
Yes, that is correct.
So is there a situation in which you would deny a request?
I haven't seen one yet.
Okay, so, but you're willing to deny requests under what circumstances?
I haven't seen an instance. I can't think of one.
You cannot think of a situation in which a denial would be appropriate to an elected official request for a meeting?
That is accurate.
Okay, so I just want to remind you under oath that there is no situation that you can envision for which a denial to a request could be issued.
At this moment, there is no situation that I can envision under which we will deny a request.
Okay, we're very happy to hear that you expect all requests to be approved.
I do not envision a scenario. I don't know how many times I can answer that question. I'll be happy to speak with you again in a month if you want, but I do not envision a scenario where a request will be denied.
No, it's just helpful to know, because then we'll certainly make our concerns known if that policy were to change. I'd just like to shift to how this policy came into place. What authority does City Hall have to interfere with mayoral agencies' ability to advise and assist the members of the City Council?
So I think that this is a mayoral administration policy, and so Mayor Adams has the authority to establish the policies for his administration. And I think he wanted me to share with you today that he would never intervene if any of you establish a process by which individuals should interact with your staff or team members. And so here at City Hall in this administration, we see our agencies and the commissioners not as separate entities, but of extensions of City Hall and as full partners of the Adams administration.
Okay. I'd just like to note that if an elected official or the mayor himself were to have a policy where we needed to fill out a form to meet with him, I don't think anyone would blink. But what you've created here is a policy that applies to thousands of city workers, that for us to set up a meeting with any one of them, we have to go through a centralized process where you and the mayor are presumably reviewing each and every one of those requests. Is that right?
We have a centralized system, and it is in fact true that the IGA team oversees the process.
I'd like to just come back to the legal authority that you believe you have in creating this process. Chapter 16 of the city charter grants certain powers and duties, quote unquote, to the heads of mayoral agencies. In particular, Section 386 directs heads of mayoral agencies to, quote, advise and assist the mayor, other elected officials, and bodies of elected officials in regard to matters under the jurisdiction of their agencies. So I just want to ask again, what legal authority does the mayor have to interfere with mayoral agencies' ability to advise and assist the city council and other elected officials as is guaranteed in the city charter?
Councilmember Ressler, thank you so much for that question. I think you know this about me, but unfortunately I am not an attorney. So I can't answer that question, but I will refer that question to our chief counsel's office, and perhaps we can get you an answer.
Was a legal analysis conducted of the mayor's ability to enact this policy in advance?
The mayor conducts a legal analysis before he implements any new policies here.
So a legal analysis was conducted in advance?
The mayor conducts a legal analysis before
The mayor's
he
not a lawyer
implements.
either, like you or me.
Yes, but we have a very competent legal staff, our chief counsel, Lisa Zornberg, as well as the Office of the Corporation Counsel. So we did work in collaboration with them on the launch of this new protocol.
So the chief counsel and the Corporation Counsel both reviewed this policy before it was enacted?
They were both engaged in the development of it, yes.
Okay, so they reviewed and approved this policy, and they reviewed Chapter 16 of the city.
I can't speak to that.
You can't speak to what they reviewed, but I would just like to underscore that the charter mandates that mayoral agencies advise and assist the mayor, other elected officials, and bodies of elected officials in regard to matters under the jurisdiction of their agencies. You know, you've recently put forward or it appears you're intending to put forward a candidate for Corporation Counsel whose job is to represent the mayor, the city council, all of city government as the lawyer for the city, just as mayoral agency heads are required to do the same. Furthermore, the charter notes that heads of agencies shall, quote, have cognizance and control of the government, administration, and discipline of their agencies. So, with that in mind, do you consider a meeting with an elected official to be part of the government and administration of a city agency?
So I don't feel comfortable speaking on my interpretation of the city charter.
It's not a legal interpretation, it's just a plain question. Do you consider a meeting with an elected official to be part of the government and administration of an agency?
So as I was starting to say, and I'm sorry, council member, I am not here to speak on, my interpretation of the city charter. Our mayoral agencies work at the in collaboration with Mayor Eric Adams and carry out the goals of this administration.
Right, but it is the role of an agency. The agency head has the authority to determine the government, administration, and discipline of their agency. It is interfering by imposing this policy and requiring that every agency head check with you and the mayor before they set up a phone call with Councilmember Gutierrez.
So,
it is interfering with their charter mandated role.
Councilmember, I appreciate your opinion on this matter. My team and I will discuss that with the mayor upon conclusion of this hearing.
I'd like to just underscore that I believe this is in stark conflict with the city charter, and that you have undermined the independence of agency heads and their roles and responsibilities to work collaboratively with elected officials by imposing this policy. I'd like to go back to the...
And Councilmember, just to address that point, we firmly disagree with your interpretation of this and hope that you can take some time to meet with us outside of this public forum so that we can
Do I have to
speak
fill
with
out a
you
form?
step by step.
Seriously, do I have to fill out a form? Because that's the message I get on every request I send to City Hall and to city agencies these days, is to fill out a form and wait. Do I have to fill out a form to have a follow-up conversation with you about this?
You can always call me up and have a conversation, Councilmember Ressler.
That was not an answer to the question. I want to go back to the reason or the impetus for this, because I think the mayor clarified it at a recent press conference. On April 16th, a reporter asked the mayor about the reason for this policy, and the reporter specifically mentioned my name, actually, in their question. In the mayor's response, he said certain elected officials were having greater access than others. Did the mayor implement this policy because I work effectively with city agencies to deliver results for my constituents?
So, Councilmember Ressler, thank you for that question. I know that in my engagement, and I'm sure that you can recall this from when you worked across the aisle in the council at the mayor's office, there are often times when elected officials have reached out to city agencies and their calls, emails have gone unresponded to, but they hold City Hall and the City Hall staff responsible for those misinteractions. And so the development of this protocol is to make sure that communications are streamlined and efficiently directed in a manner that is timely and efficient.
Yeah, I mean, look, I worked at City Hall, as you noted. I worked in intergovernmental affairs. I managed agencies' communications with elected officials and external stakeholders, and never would we have ever created a policy that would have interfered with elected officials' ability to do their job. And I set up weekly reports where agencies let us know what key incoming they were getting from electeds, what upcoming meetings they had. We guided and provided support and coordinated, as is your role. But to interfere and prevent elected officials from engaging with city agencies is a dangerous politicization of city government.
We believe that we are aiding the communications to elected officials, not interfering. And I think that oftentimes some people believe that technology is a tool for the future. But here in the Adams administration, we believe that technology is a tool that we should be utilizing now. And so this new tool that we're utilizing is going to prove to be an effective manner in which elected officials can reach out to our agencies and connect with agency leaders. We firmly believe that.
I am a little surprised that we're talking about a multiple page Microsoft Office form as new technology, but that aside, this is not about technology, this is about bureaucratic bottlenecks. And the idea that the mayor is going to review hundreds of forms daily if every elected official in New York City actually complied with this is just an absolutely maddening approach to governing the city.
And so, you know, it's really unfortunate that you feel that way. As I've said in my testimony, we really believe that this tool will improve access to city agencies for all elected officials from all levels, city, state, and federal. I can recall an instance where a newly elected official was one of the first individuals to access this tool because they didn't probably have the same level of knowledge about how to navigate the city bureaucracy that you mentioned that many of you here have had experience navigating.
Yeah, I mean, historically, the main way that elected officials and others have tracked who and where to contact, who to contact at city agencies is the Green Book. The Green Book, managed by DCAS, is should be an up-to-date resource that tracks who are the senior agency officials and what are their contact information at every single agency. Mm-hmm. But do you have an update on when the last time the Green Book was updated?
You know, I don't want to speak out of turn, so can you please share that information
with me? It's been years since we've had updates, many agencies in the Green Book.
It was which administration?
Under your administration for the last 2 years and 4 months, we have not seen proper, consistent updates of the Green Book. That is the place where you Google and find information about where to contact city agencies, not create silly bureaucratic processes and politicize who can engage with which agency. Why is the administration not taken updating the Green Book seriously?
So I think that I can recall that the Green Book hadn't been updated in the previous administration as well. So it's been a number of years prior to the Adams administration.
There are some updates in some agencies, but many have not.
Technologies change, and the way that administrations do business change. And so the Adams administration implemented this technology because we believe that this is an effective manner in which we can address a lot of the needs that the Green Book did, but in a more modern day way.
Why is it a more modern or efficient process, instead of having elected officials contact agencies directly, to have all of those hundreds of daily requests go through you and the mayor to personally review? How is that a more efficient process?
So it's unfortunate that you are not open to just exploring how efficient this is. I can't.
No, I want you to explain it to me, because it doesn't make any sense.
I don't think there's anything more that I could say than I already said to justify
so is the mayor reviewing every single one of these requests himself?
The mayor believes that this is a great tool. He has access to the form and reserves the right to look at it whenever he wants to. But the responsibility of managing the form and the requests submitted lie within the IGA unit.
So the mayor is reviewing every form?
The mayor has access to it. He believes in the collection of data. You may have recalled him saying that at the beginning of his career, he was involved in the early form of the CompStat program. As we know, CompStat is an effective law enforcement tool that is not only used in New York City, but has been replicated all throughout the country. And so, you know, he has implemented all forms of processes and technologies. When he first, if you please let me finish, thank you. When he first took office, he implemented a similar system for individuals who wanted to meet with him in his administration. He would have continued, and we probably would have launched this next stage that we're discussing here today sooner. But it's unfortunate that we've been distracted by so many real-life crises, the asylum seeker crisis. We most recently had a minor earthquake. We've had all kinds of things happen. And so this was always a part of our technological strategy to try to streamline city processes and services.
Unfortunately, you haven't yet explained how it streamlines city processes or services. I'd like to just share a quote with you.
It's a one-stop shop, and it holds us accountable because we can see in one place where all of the requests are made. But you know,
the accountability piece,
I can only imagine. I look at my emails that I receive every day, sometimes thousands a day. I can only imagine what it looks like for our agency leaders, as well as your offices. But what I do know is that with this form, no requests will ever go missed, no emails will go missed or noticed several days later than they were sent. And so that's how it streamlines the process, because it puts all of the requests in one centralized place that we can follow and track and make sure that the responses are
I can certainly appreciate that it could be a resource. It could be a way that people could reach out to City Hall and make sure that there was City Hall's attention around an issue. But what you've done is prevented any of us from engaging and doing the daily work of advocating for our constituents by directly engaging with city agencies to solve problems.
Well,
So it's
Councilmem-
not an alternative or an additional way in which you can help. It's actually a bureaucratic bottleneck that doesn't make any sense. I'd like to just share a quote with you. Back a few years ago, this quote, "The need of a comprehensive directory of city departments has long been recognized, but has remained for the present administration to issue the first edition of the Green Book," said Supervisor of the City Record Peter J. Brady in 1918. Over 100 years ago, we created a resource for people to be able to contact senior leadership and agencies. If the Adams administration were intent on making it easier for all of us to engage with city agencies and senior leadership, you would simply update the relevant information online and encourage every elected official to follow it and engage with the appropriate stakeholders at agencies. This process creates an unnecessary bottleneck. It's not about accountability, it's about undermining efficiency. It is actually about slowing down engagement and in making it harder for us to get our problems solved because we have the politicization of City Hall that is the lens through which everything is approved.
Councilmember Ressler, it's unfortunate that you feel that way. I respectfully disagree with you. I joined the Adams administration. You know my background. You know where I grew up. I believe that at some point, if I recall, you even met my late mother. I did not join this administration to become a bureaucrat. I joined this administration so that I could contribute to the city of New York and serve not only the people of the city of New York and the community that I come from, but also to just do good work, to make a change, to make a difference. And that's what I'm committed to. And I have to say that it's hurtful to hear you reduce the work that we're trying to do in the Adams administration to the level in which you're describing our efforts today.
It's not personal. This is a just simple critique that what's been proposed makes no sense. And we want to have policies in place that allow us to effectively advocate and deliver for our constituents. We don't want to have bureaucratic bottlenecks at City Hall stopping us from engaging city agencies, engaging the Parks Department, engaging the Department of Education, engaging the Department of Small Business Services to meet the needs of our constituents each and every day.
So there have been no bottlenecks. Most of the
Because most elected
submissions-
officials have refused to
most of
engage.
And that's unfortunate, and I hope that those of you who have refused to engage reconsider, but many of you have engaged and have seen that the turnaround and the responses that you received from City Hall probably come a lot quicker than maybe you may have received from some of our agency staff, because they're busy serving the people of the city of New York every day as well.
If a lobbyist is interested in meeting with a city agency or City Hall with yourself, are they required to fill out a similar form?
That is not in my purview, so I don't have an answer for that.
But lobbyists meet with you all the time, right? Is a lobbyist required to fill out a form to meet with you, Ms. Raspberry?
So what I will say is that we're in the process of implementing the next stage of this,
Okay.
and this is creating a form so that even when you
How
want
many
to
lobbyists have you met with in the previous month?
Not many. I can't think of any that I've met with. I
Okay.
primarily engage with elected officials.
So you haven't met with any lobbyists in the previous month?
I can't recall.
The mayor unfortunately doesn't release much of his schedule, unlike previous mayors, but, lobbyists spent $33 million last year to lobby the mayor and his agencies.
Mm-hmm.
There are meetings with mayoral agencies and with City Hall representatives all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Are they required to fill out any form, to the best of your knowledge, today, to meet with with representatives from your administration? Yes or no?
I don't have an answer to that
But
question.
you're
I can get
a
back
direct
to you.
report to the mayor, you're a senior staffer. Are you aware of any form, or it's just a yes or no, are you aware of any form that any lobbyist has to fill out on behalf of their corporate clients and real estate interests, special interests?
Yes, actually.
You're aware
If
of a form?
you-
Please tell us.
Who want to meet with Mayor Adams, who
Okay,
you're referencing?
other than the mayor, anybody
he
else?
has a form that you have to fill out to meet with him.
Any other representative of the administration, are you aware of any form that any lobbyist has to fill out to meet with anyone outside of Mayor Eric Adams in the entire 330,000 person Adams administration?
I know that it's the mayor's desire that everyone in the senior leadership adopts a form similar to his for meetings. And so we are working on that as we speak.
I just have to say, for us to have a process where you're requiring every elected official to jump through a multi-page form of lots of silly questions that you want us to fill out, but lobbyists have direct access to every single person in this administration is a horrible juxtaposition of who you are prioritizing, serving, and supporting. We are here as duly elected representatives on behalf of the people of New York. Lobbyists are there on behalf of special interests, and you are prioritizing their access over our own to meet the needs of our constituents.
I respectfully disagree with you.
I'd
But
like
I
to-
also want to point out that I have a copy of the form somewhere here with me. And it's a very basic form that takes only seconds to fill out. And I know that here in the council, we can all understand the importance of data collection and making sure that things are characterized in an appropriate way and responded to and tracked.
I am all here for data collection. I am not here for inefficiency and bureaucratic roadblocks. I'd like to just ask you a hypothetical question. I'll close on one topic and then kick it over to my colleagues. I apologize for going so long. I'd like to ask a hypothetical question. If an elected official has an ongoing chronic issue in their district in which they were regularly meeting with representatives from city agencies to push forward and find solutions, would they be required to fill out this form?
I'm sorry, can you repeat your question?
If an elected official had an ongoing chronic issue in their district in which they were regularly meeting with representatives from city agencies to push forward and find solutions, would they be required to fill out this form?
That's a very good question, and one that we commonly hear, so I'm glad that I have the chance to address it here. So let's say you have a long-standing, reoccurring meeting about an issue with a school in your district. What we would like is for our agency staff to input that into the system so that we can have a registration of it. We can know that it's happening. But once you have it in for the one time, there's no need to go to the form on a
I think
repetitive
you misheard
basis.
the question. I apologize. If there was an ongoing chronic issue, regular meetings were already happening, do now elected officials need to fill out this form before those meetings can continue?
I'm sorry if my answer was not clear. I said if you have an ongoing meeting that you've been having, let's say over the past year or 6 months,
Monthly meeting.
I would ask our agency, IGA staff, to submit that to the form, I'm sorry, it's not a Google Doc, but it's like one, so that we would have a record of it. And once it's submitted the one time, there is no need to resubmit for every recurring meeting.
Okay, well, this isn't what happened to Speaker Adams. Her district office has been convening an interagency task force to address issues relating to the Tuskegee Airmen Way for more than a year. Their collaborative partnership has been productive and helpful in alleviating long-standing concerns for local residents. But after the mayor imposed this new form, agencies effectively stopped participating, hindering the immense progress made on the Tuskegee Airmen Way. This is not the service that her constituents or any of our communities across the city want or deserve. So we hope that you'll begin having those meetings again with Speaker Adams' staff to get the Tuskegee Airmen Way process moving forward.
Thank you for raising that concern, and I believe that we've corrected many of these questions that you've spoken about. But as you can
I can
imagine,
promise you, they have not been corrected.
These are emerging issues. The forum has only been operational for the last couple of weeks, and I would encourage you, when you meet these kinds of challenges, that you call me or my staff, Connor Martinez, who you know very well, who's the Director of City Legislative Affairs, to raise them with us and we can discuss it so that we can address them on a one-by-one basis.
Just want to be clear, the speaker is not a stranger to City Hall. She knows everyone in the mayor's office. She's raised the issues and was told she needs to fill out a form to see this issue move forward. I'm asking on her behalf, is the administration prepared to continue these meetings and move forward to address?
Of course, and I believe we had a meeting in her district with our agency representatives last week.
She is keen to see this move forward, as
And
am
if you
I.
have any specific information, the type of meeting, the agency, that would help me address this more directly.
We will follow up with you in writing with all the relevant information, but we're very pleased to hear that you're ready to move forward on this important issue.
Thank you.
Two more questions from the speaker. The speaker has publicly stated that she initially found out about this directive via a journalist post on social media, which is of course unacceptable. Did the administration intend to brief the speaker and the council on this mandate? If so, when?
Of course, as you know, we have regular communication with multiple senior leadership level staff members in the Speaker's office. We had a rollout plan for this engagement. It started with briefing our agency leaders and administration officials and ironing out any questions or concerns that they had. Our next phase was to convene the elected officials, and you all know that I love to convene large groups of elected officials on Zoom calls, right? It's something that we do quite regularly. And that was something that we had planned. Unfortunately, the information broke in the news before we could get that meeting scheduled. And at that point, instead of being able to communicate with all of you and discuss the rollout, we had to respond to the criticisms that were communicated to the press. And so it's very unfortunate. It is never our desire that you or anyone in the council find out about any policies that would impact the manner in which you would have to engage with this administration through the news.
Well, we were certainly very disappointed to find out about this in the news rather than in direct communication from City Hall. And still, 3 weeks after the announcement of this policy, there has been no formal briefing, shy of an email that frankly included significant conflicting and contradictory information. One more question from the speaker, and then I'll pass it to my colleagues. Council members have had long-standing relationships with agency leadership and their staff for many years. I'm not asking Gail how many years. Since the implementation of this there you go. Since the implementation of this directive, we and our staff have received a lot of feedback from our agency partners, much of which has been angry and apologetic with regard to the disruption in helping us effectively serve our communities. What feedback, if any, have you received from agency commissioners and directors with regard to this form?
So I'm not going to share in this public forum private conversations that I have engaged with in my professional capacity, but we have received feedback from agency leaders. I've made myself available, as has the mayor, our deputy mayors, to any agency leader that has any concerns that they want to express or discuss. And I take, and we all take very seriously, all of the recommendations that have been made.
Well, I think as is clear, it's disappointing that there was no consultation or communication with elected officials in advance of creating this process. It's even more disappointing that there hasn't been a briefing and a real conversation with elected officials in the 3 weeks since. I have heard from over a dozen people in senior roles in the Adams administration, folks at City Hall, intergov staff at agencies, agency heads, who have been embarrassed by this new policy and their inability to do their jobs effectively and to partner with us because they know how much they rely on us to do their jobs. I'm going to pass it to colleagues for questions, and hopefully we'll have some time to circle back for a second round.
And Councilmember Ressler, thank you. I want to thank you for these questions and for this open dialogue. And I want to say, it's always a very tricky situation. My team and I are in the process of planning a briefing, and we honestly thought about doing it this week, but we didn't know if you might find it to be a conflict with this hearing, so we wanted to come to the hearing first, hear your concerns before we have the briefing. So you will receive notification for a briefing very soon, and I hope that we can continue this dialogue, not just here in this public forum, but in a way where we can roll up our sleeves and really get things done. Thank you.
And we've been joined by Council Members Holden and Hanif. I just want to say, deputy mayors, commissioners, staff at City Hall call me every day. And you could have called me too if you wanted to talk about it. We're always available to work together, even if that's not the approach of the Adams administration. I'm going to pass it over to colleagues for questions. We'll start with the public advocate and then Councilmember Brewer.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ms. Raspberry, I want to start off by acknowledging my belief of your genuinely wanting to do good for the people of the city of New York. I've known you for a long time. I believe that, so I want to start off, genuinely believe that. I also want to say that I think I want to do the same, and in that, I sometimes may make mistakes. That doesn't take away my intention of what I was trying to do and have been trying to do. I believe this administration as a whole, for over 2 years, has the inability to publicly say when they've made a mistake or done something they didn't mean to do. And instead of saying, we made an error here, here's how we're going to correct it, there's a doubling and tripling down of that. And from what I've heard in the testimony, it seems like there's now an attempt to clean up a process that wasn't well thought out from the beginning. I think there's a way that that could have been done without this hearing. And so that is my level of frustration. I did want to just quickly ask, and one of the things that was just mentioned, if something was mentioned by a reporter that wasn't supposed to be, and my understanding was that it was in response to something the administration had actually said, the administration actually said, why not pause the form, have the briefing, and then implement it? What was so urgent that we had to implement the form at that moment in time?
So thank you so much for your question, Public Advocate Williams. And I know that we are all well-intentioned in trying to work on behalf of the people of the city of New York. I just want to make it clear that the Adams administration, everything that we do is well thought out. I don't think it's a fair assessment to say we're not just haphazardly making decisions and taking actions. We have a lot of really highly skilled public servants who spend a great deal of time making sure that we are working to serve the people of New York the best way that we know how. You asked a very valid question about the rollout. Once the press wrote the story, we wanted to make sure that we communicated as much as we could. For any elected officials who reached out to us, we had meetings with them. Councilmember Ressler mentioned the correspondence that our team sent. I know that you said you felt that it was insufficient. At all points, we communicated that we were available to answer direct questions. We wanted to talk to people on a one-on-one basis because we felt like if you have very specific questions, we want to make sure we get you very specific answers. And so our plan was well thought out. But unfortunately, we live in a time now where there's a 24-hour news cycle.
I just want, and I'm sorry, gently, I don't know how much time I have, but my specific question is, what was happening so urgently that you couldn't pause the implementation to have the conversations? Why did it have to happen right at that moment in time?
Having quick starts and stops is confusing. And so
But it
one
hadn't
thing
started.
that we want to always make sure is that our messaging is consistent. And I think that
The
3 weeks
the process
into
hadn't started.
2-3 weeks into this process, there's still plenty of time and opportunity for us to answer the questions that you may have and talk about the process.
At the moment in time I'm talking about, the process hadn't started, so it wouldn't have been a starting and stopping. It would have pushed a few weeks so that we can have this conversation privately as opposed to starting and stopping. So why was that the decision made, not to pause it then and to go through this process to where we're going through it now?
I appreciate your question. Thank you again. As you know, I serve at the pleasure of Mayor Adams, and this is his policy. And so he made the decision that we should move forward. And I know that he would be open to having a conversation with you if you wanted to question why he chose that.
Well, we can let him know this was probably the worst way to put forward even a well-intentioned, particularly when you heard feedback that it was going to be troublesome. And I think this is a great example of how the administration decides to move forward. Another thing about the charter, we have some charter questions as well. I won't bring it up because it sounds like we're not prepared to answer. I just want to be clear, in the well-intentioned, thought-out process, are you saying that the attorneys reviewed the charter to make sure that this form complied with the charter mandate?
I don't know what the process was that the law department and our chief counsel's office engaged in when they reviewed this form. But I can't imagine that they don't take all the law fully into consideration when they're reviewing policies.
So in the well-thought-out process, we're just not sure if the charter was reviewed.
Well, you called me here to speak about my experience with the form, and it was not in my responsibility to review the city charter as it pertained to the form. So I can only speak on the job that I did and that I continue to do in this area every day.
And the last thing I will say is because, and I'm, you know, the form itself says completion of this form does not result in a guarantee of a meeting or appearance, which says to me that there is a way that it will be denied. I still would love to understand what that way, what was envisioned for it to be denied. Otherwise, we wouldn't have that.
I don't know if anything was envisioned, but
Well, I'm
none
sorry,
of
could I
us can predict the future. All that I could speak on right now is that there haven't been any requests that have been denied.
And then you mentioned another thing that I hadn't heard of at all.
And
which
I'd
was,
like to say, Councilmember Ressler, we believe you submitted a request, but maybe someone
I have not submitted a request.
submitted it as spam, but when
No,
it
your
was
staff submitted a request on my behalf.
submitted, we thought we responded immediately, so.
I know I just want to finish this because one, I don't know if you know in the form, to speak with my office, myself, says I have to fill out a form, which is quite interesting. I don't know if you've reviewed to make sure everything makes sense there. But the other part is, you mentioned something else I hadn't brought up, which is some elected officials, newly elected officials, don't have the same contacts, which is a separate problem. I'm not sure why this would not be one way that you can contact if you don't have the contacts, as opposed to the only way to try to provide this. So this clearly seems like this is a process put in place to solve a problem that no one else knew was happening except the administration. And if there was an issue, I think it should have been reversed, that the administration find a way to gather that and hold them accountable for not responding, not having duly elected officials whose job is to hold the administration accountable, jump through a bureaucratic hoop that could possibly be denied. And thank you so much. For the second round, I might do that as well.
And Public Advocate, I really appreciate your feedback. Thank you.
Thank you.
I just want to strongly echo the public advocate sentiments, and I just want to come back, since he and I both saw pretty obvious conflicts with the charter as a result of this policy. I understand you're not a lawyer, but did you read the legal analyses that the Corporation Counsel and Chief Counsel seemingly created for this policy, or did you speak to the attorneys to affirm that they thought it was a legal and appropriate policy?
I will have to get, I did not see any legal analysis.
And
no.
you did not speak with the attorneys to check or ask or affirm if this...
Of course, we all sit and talk all the time, but you're trying to ask a very specific question that I'm just telling you is not in my purview, and that is not what you asked me here today. And to be quite honest with you, I asked this committee to provide me with questions prior to coming here.
Ms. Raspberry,
so
with
if
all
you
due
had
respect, I offered to do a call with you in
if
advance of
you-
this, and you said no.
If you had provided me with these questions, I would be able to answer you, but
I ask
you
every
keep
agency
asking
who comes
the
before
same
my
questions
committee.
about the city charter over and over, and I am not here to address what any lawyer in this administration's interpretation of the city charter was
I
as
simply
it
asked if
pertained
you
to this form.
discussed it with them, and I just want to be clear, I offer every administration witness who comes before my committee the opportunity to speak in advance. I offered you that same opportunity, and you demurred. So please don't imply otherwise on the record. Ms. Brewer, Councilmember Brewer?
Thank you. The last Green Book was 2016 de Blasio, and I have them back to 1978, just in case people want to know when the last Green Book was. And sometimes, just in terms of access, Green Book NYC online is fine, but there are not many phone numbers there. So what I do is I look at the number, I look at the date, I look at the title of the job, I call that number, and I get somebody. So it's just a crazy way to have to do work sometimes. This, as you know, makes me crazy, this form. No mayor's ever asked for it. It does feel a little bit like Big Brother wants to know what's going on, as opposed to good government. So, I have the honor, of course, of the Oversight and Investigations Committee. They have an investigation staff. If they're going to do an investigation, they always contact the agency, they state what they're doing, but on other times it makes sense to do an investigation without contacting the agency. What I'm saying is they are now precluded from going to certain locations, particularly focused on migrants, unless they fill out a form. That is not, in my opinion, and nor in the opinion of the attorneys working on that committee, appropriate. That doesn't mean that they can't do their job. So how would you respond? These are not elected officials. These are staff people who have a job similar to what the public advocate does, I guess, to do an investigation, to then bring the information back to the city council, happy to share it, have a hearing, do a report, always with information going to the agency. But the idea of having to tell the mayor that all of that is happening, it borders on insane to me. So I'm just want to understand is even an investigations that is legally mandated as an oversight body has to go through a form? That's my question.
So thank you so much for that question. I can recall an instance, I think within the last 2 weeks, so within the first week that we utilized this form, where a staff member from the Oversight and Investigations Committee reached out wanting to schedule a tour with the NYPD to go on a ride-along. We responded immediately. I think that since that happened, they've gone out, staff members have gone out on 2 different ride-alongs with the NYPD. So in that instance, it didn't interrupt the process of government. And it's no different than what was happening before, because prior to this, anytime the Oversight and Investigations Committee wanted to engage with any of our agencies, they would reach out on average to the IGA unit, and we would respond.
Well,
So that's no different.
Okay,
than
but that's
this.
different than filling out a form. There's a very different feeling than, in some cases, calling to let you or your staff know what's going on. It's a very different feeling.
I think it's psychological, because I think that we're moving into a different time, and putting your name and address and a question into a submission form.
Okay.
I think that this form has sort of become like the boogeyman in the room, and I don't know if you've ever opened it or looked at it, but it's not
Okay.
as complicated as.
We're going to differ. Let's just keep going. Today's Daily News had a story on this topic and mentioned that all of the forms that have been filled out need to be on the open data platform. Are they?
Are you asking me about the open data law?
Yeah. I know
Yeah.
the open data law. I wrote it.
The administration is compliant with the law on those matters.
So the requests that have been made, which would be in a database, are now on the open data platform? That's a question.
So I know that our chief counsel is working with OTI to make sure that we are compliant with this form.
For this particular request of data? Okay.
Yes.
Now, agencies, as you know, with all due respect, I know most of the commissioners longer than you, longer than the mayor. I know most of the people in the agencies longer than you and longer than the mayor. And I have all their cell numbers. Literally half of city government, I have their cell number. And I have 30,000 interns in city government, all over the place. So the notion that to talk to them, I have to fill out a form, you can't imagine how it feels. It's like ridiculous. So I will not fill out a form. I'm just letting you know.
And so
I will continue to get my work done by talking to the people for whom I have great respect. You have phenomenal, phenomenal commissioners. And they don't want to fill out a form. So my question to you is, have you, because they obviously don't want to lose their job, so they may not tell you, I don't want to fill out a form. But I have 10 people who have called me, and I'm sure there are others, who say that having this form is impeding their ability to do their job.
So, council member, thank you for that question. As I mentioned in my remarks, there are very specific instances when we are asking you all to fill out this form. We are not telling you that you can't call the people that you know and that you are friendly with and have conversations. If you are calling an agency leader to ask them for an update on a conversation that you've already begun, we're not telling you to fill out a form. I listed out some very specific instances, and so you should continue, all of you, to enjoy the relationships that you have with your former interns, former colleagues, and friends. You know, politics, I've worked in and out of this building over the last 20 years as well. So we all have longstanding relationships and friendships that, go beyond the workday. And that's the great thing about this work that we do. And we should all continue to utilize those conversations. We are just asking that if you are looking for agency leaders to deploy city services to your district, or if you are looking for formal meetings, you should utilize the form.
Okay. One other issue is related. We obviously get a lot of eviction requests. We get a lot of human service requests. There is a form you have to fill out. It's not related to your form. It's a different form. And what happens is the agencies are nervous, the constituents are nervous, my staff is nervous, because by filling out that form, which does take some time to comply with by the agencies, sometimes we are not able to deal with the eviction. So there's another form. I will get you information offline, but the notion that any of these forms impede the work of government, I have to say, if I was in charge, and I'm not, I would say, we made a mistake on this form. We will, at this point, as I think the public advocate said, we will pause, figure out what makes sense, when is the form actually necessary. It really, I have to say, all the way back to Ed Koch, Bloomberg, nobody's ever asked, and I don't even know if around the country anybody's ever asked. It sets a cold blanket, shall we say, on the work between city government and the people who want, just like you, city to succeed. Now, you're very accessible. Your staff is fabulous. I don't think this helps with them doing their job, and I know it doesn't make sense for the agencies. If you're asking the agencies honestly, they're going to tell you this is not helpful to them. Because 10 of them have told me.
I
So I really
appreciate-
wish you would reconsider it. I know the mayor, he's just as stubborn as I am. And when
That
he
is really
decides he's gonna
stubborn.
do something, he's gonna do it. I'm stubborn too. But this would be an example when you would say, Mayor Copa, I've made a mistake, and let's see if we can review this and figure out a different system for how we can communicate better. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you so much.
And if I have a moment,
Sure, briefly.
I consider it one of the greatest privileges of my professional career to work for Mayor Eric Adams. I think that he is a great leader. And so I will take everything that you have said here back to our team under consideration, but I don't want to walk away without stating that whatever personal feelings are. You know, Mayor Adams is a great public servant, and he is doing the very best that he can to make sure that city services are provided to the people of the city of New York in a non-bureaucratic, efficient, and effective manner. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Brewer. I'd like to now pass it to Councilmember Gutierrez and thank her for her leadership on kind of calling out the importance of the open data law. And I'd like to acknowledge our education chair, Councilmember Rita Joseph, for joining us. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Chair. Tiffany, thank you for your testimony. Can I just have a clear understanding, maybe I missed this in your examples, where the submission of this form would be required? Requesting a meeting with police captain at my local precinct? Do I need to fill out that form?
So yes, he's considered an agency leader. But in contrast, if you have a concern and an emergency concern, you want to reach out to the captain, you should feel free to do that. If you want to reach out to the community affairs officers in a precinct, you should continue to do that. This is solely directed at leaders in the city service.
Okay. Well, I'll just say that in my experience in North Brooklyn, we've had quite a turnover of captains in the 2.5 years since I've been in office. So this would be this scenario of submitting forms would be often in this instance if I'm requesting a meet and greet with the new captain, because it's happened in multiple of my precincts within a very short window of time.
Yes, and you know, I've heard from your colleagues in an instance where a new captain might start at a precinct and they've reached out that they didn't get a response as quickly as they've wanted, and City Hall has had to intervene to coordinate communication. And so this, if you're saying that you're experiencing great turnover, this solves that problem, because you will always be sure to get in front of those individuals in a quick and efficient way.
Well, I never had an issue connecting with them despite the turnover, right? In general, the culture has been, I'm new here, let's meet with the elected officials. And now what I'm saying is the requirement of this form makes it so on top of the turnover, there's a constant, like, we have to submit a form to do a meeting, just a meet and greet with new captains. But I do want to move on. I'm sorry, Tiffany.
If the captain wants to reach out to you, the captain does not have to submit a form. So we are not trying to impose upon any desire that any agency leaders have to need to engage with your offices.
What about meeting with school principals?
School principals do not fall into this category.
And what about anybody from the local firehouses?
If you're meeting with leadership, it would apply.
Okay. I would love to...
And in the point in which you're engaging with FDNY officials might be likely in emergency situations. So in no way would this apply in those instances.
Okay. I would like if you can just expand in your testimony. You mentioned that there haven't been any denial of requests. But I do know from certain members that they were denied specific requests. So they had asked for a walkthrough with a commissioner, and the request was denied with the commissioner, but a suggestion was made to meet with another agency head. Do you have the number on how many of those you've responded with?
I don't, and I apologize. I don't have that information
But
on hand,
wouldn't-
but I can get back to you.
Okay, and you wouldn't qualify that as a denial?
Not at all.
Okay, but if a member is seeking a walkthrough with a commissioner and the agency says, no, but you can meet with so-and-so, that is a denial.
It's not a denial, because I think that this is streamlining resources and making sure that appropriate members of the administration are handling appropriate tasks. So if there is a borough-specific or community-specific outreach that you're making, it might be more appropriate for you to talk with the borough commissioner who has more direct knowledge about it for this walkthrough than to have the commissioner go out and then follow up with the commissioner at a later time.
But why not make that an option as opposed to this is the response?
Well-
And I'll just say that in that, and I can talk to you offline, in that specific scenario, the commissioner reached out to the members saying that they were happy to do this tour. They were just being told they couldn't do it.
So I appreciate the feedback and would love to continue the conversation offline.
And was there, on the spirit of opting in, was there a conversation before the launch of this form with agency commissioners and the option for those agencies that maybe get thousands of requests versus agencies that get significantly less? Was there an option for them to opt in or opt out of this form
We
process?
believe in uniformity, so this is not an optional process in our administration. But we did seek feedback from agency leaders throughout the city service before the deployment of this form.
Can you share with no specific people, but what was some of the feedback?
As I stated the last time one of your colleagues asked me a question, I'm not going to share confidential conversations that we have in this administration, but thank you.
Okay, but so then we have no way of knowing if the feedback was negative or positive about the form. There was just existing conversations, but they were neither supportive of it or not, is what I can walk away with.
I don't think of information in that way, negative or positive. I think that,
It's feedback.
we're
Feedback
not-
is in that way,
Mayor
positive or
Adams
negative.
welcomes critical comments, critical communications. We're not afraid of having hard conversations, and if anyone has any criticism, as I'm sitting here today listening to all of you, we're happy to hear it, take it back, and consider it.
Okay, I would just like to add to what Chair Ressler said earlier, where I've had, and Councilmember Brewer, where I've had relationships with a lot of these commissioners for a long time, and I'm connecting with them one-on-one, and they are not, I think they do not agree with the intention of this form, which, as you've repeated, is to create more efficiency. They agree with a lot of the members here that it's inefficient, that it's not an appropriate way to really run InterGov. And just in the last second, I think you said it before, but if I could just get you to confirm, because we did send out a letter to the mayor, you were copied on wanting to hear a commitment on the compliance of any and all data collection for the purpose of open law. Can you just repeat whether you are all committed to submitting all data information?
We are committed to complying with the open data law, yes.
Thank you.
And I just want to say thank you for your questions. Thank you for the letter. Change is hard, and change is often met with resistance, but there are lots of systems that have been introduced that were resisted at first and then in the long run proved to be worthwhile and worthy. And so we want to let our work speak for us. If you submit a request to the tracker and you get a timely response and you're able to connect with agency leaders, then that's just my work and our administration's work speaking for us. And that's all we want the chance to be able to do.
Do you all, sorry, Chair, one last question. Do you all have an intention to assess the efficiency of this form at some point within 3 to 6 months and say, this is what we want to change, this is actually not good? Is that something that you can share with us now, that there is an intention to look, assess, evolve if necessary?
We are doing that every day. And that's really the point of data collection. Data collection allows you to look at things from a bigger picture and see where the needs are, where resources perhaps need to be deployed at extra resources. And so we are reviewing our systems, all of them, all the time, and having, very detailed conversations about what's working, what's not working, and what we could be doing differently, better, and just making sure that we're providing services to the best of our ability.
And can I just ask, and it's not, you don't have to answer right now, that in compliance with open data, that the administration make the distinction between denials that are made versus suggestions that are made with appropriate staff?
So
Thank
as
you.
I said, our chief counsel, Lisa Zornberg, is working very closely with the OTI team to make sure that the city of New York remains compliant with that law. Thank you.
Thanks so much. I'd now like to go to Councilmember Palladino, followed by Councilmember Vernikoff, followed by Councilmember Holden.
Thank you very much, Chair. I appreciate it. Let me start by saying this. While Rome is burning, we're concerned about filling out papers. Let me say this also. These papers take exactly 2 minutes to do. Let me say also this. We asked the same requirement of our police officers not long ago, where all of you sat here and said it's necessary that they fill out paperwork for transparency. Well, now we're being asked to fill out a 2-minute piece of paper, which I think is outrageous. I agree with the format. I am not going against the format, because if the police have to fill out papers, guess what? So do we. And anybody who has a problem with that, too bad. You should also think before you act. Now, we all have our commissioners that we deal with. Tiffany has sat here and given us her time. The mayor's office has sat here and given us their time. And anybody who knows commissioners, we all do. And to Councilmember Brewer's point, I have a list, too, of private cell phone numbers that I know that if I call, they will answer. This is just for transparency, and like I want to say, this is absolutely ridiculous, in my opinion, that this meeting is actually even taking place, given the fact that the police have to do it. What's the big deal if they have to stop and fill out a few forms? Well, you know what? It is a big deal. But this, what we're asking to do, it gives the mayor's office transparency. It gets also to, an opportunity to see how well the offices are working, our district offices. Because I'm very proud of the way my district office works, and I'm very happy to fill out whatever needs to be filled out. So on behalf of District 19, I want to say thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councilmember Palladino. Councilmember Vernikoff.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'd just like to say that I agree with some of my colleagues here. I don't think that the form is a good policy. I think it adds to red tape and bureaucracy. But I also would like to call out the complete and utter inconsistency and hypocrisy of this body when they vote for the How Many Stops Act to burden our NYPD, who's already burdened with crime in our city. But when it comes to their doorstep, and now has to be imposed on them, then it's forms for thee, but not for me. I think that's incredibly inconsistent, and I agree with Councilmember Brewer. I think that the NYPD should do the same. I think that the NYPD should say, I'm not going to fill out this form. I think every single police officer should refuse to fill out this form, and I think that we also need a mea culpa from this body, and we need to reverse the How Many Stops Act, because we are burdening the NYPD with the inefficiency of filling out forms when they have a job to do. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councilmember Vernikoff. Councilmember Holden.
Thank you, Chair. I have a very different view of that to some of my colleagues that just spoke. We have an issue where car meetups in our communities. It's many communities around Queens and Brooklyn have these car groups that get together and they play loud music till the wee hours. So we wrote an email to some of a commander in an affected precinct. And we got an answer, you have to fill out a form. I found that insulting. I just found it insulting that we're trying to fix quality of life issues and we have to fill out a form. Particularly since I've written to the mayor, I've written to many agencies, and I get no response to my letters. So now I have to fill out a form to get a meeting together to try to solve a problem. It's just adding another level, Tiffany. It just adds another level. We have too many levels now that are not being addressed. We have quality of life issues for whatever reason. I don't want to get into all the problems that we're having, but we do have a crisis. The last thing we need is to talk to somebody to fill out paperwork on an ongoing issue. You said in your testimony that if it's an ongoing issue, constituents are complaining, that we don't have to fill out forms. Well, we do now. But if I could show you all the letters that I've written to City Hall and to agencies that we spent a lot of time writing letters, and I don't even get a response, not an email, not a response. And if you want to see it, I'll give it to you. So adding this level and adding bureaucracy to our jobs is unnecessary. And I have to agree with the public advocate. Normally I don't, but I have to agree with him on this, that what was the rush? What was the rush to roll this out, Tiffany? Tell me why. I know that you said that we got into other issues, but there's always other issues in the city. What was the rush to just hold it for a few weeks until you heard the questions on this committee? We don't know all the rules yet. Mm-hmm. Do you think that's wise to roll something out when we don't even know when do we have to fill out this form? What issues do we have to, when is it appropriate? When is it not appropriate? You see, that's adding another layer unnecessarily. If you gave us, some feedback, or if you told a speaker about this, and if we were able to give feedback, we'd say, here's a better way to do this. Here's our suggestions. We didn't get that opportunity. And we're oversight, by the way. We're oversight on the mayor's office. So we're giving you feedback. It's not personal, but I just think this is unnecessary.
Councilmember Holden, thank you so much for your comments. Our team will be following up with you to address the issues that you raised. I'm not here to interject my personal opinions about anything. I'm just here to speak on the usage of this form. But as I said before, I'm happy to meet with any of you who want to meet after this hearing so that we can discuss the concerns and recommendations that you have.
But again, listen to, you got to almost put yourself in our position too. I understand. I'm not going to get into the how many stops. Again, we're not here for that. That's been done. What we're here for is to make this city work and to address quality of life. When my former precinct commander, who I feel didn't address half the issues that on car meetups. In fact, they never gave summonses to the people making noise at all hours for a couple of years. We got very few noise summonses. And then I had to come up with legislation to try to solve that. Then we're getting told by the same commanding officer, who's now in another precinct in Queens, experienced the same issues, to try to get a meeting together with some of the commanders of the affected precincts, fill out a form, I get told. That's insulting. Because we didn't get the service we were supposed to get. And it's almost like this is unnecessary. Unnecessary. Let's stop adding stuff. Let's solve these issues in the right way. And if we have to know all the rules and regulations to filling out a form, then you got to see that's adding another layer of bureaucracy. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you so much, Councilmember Holden. I just want to say, if you're keen to understand what meetings are happening between elected officials and your agencies, why not just ask agencies to report that information directly back to you when they hold meetings? Why not take this bureaucratic obstacle out of the way and just report back the meetings that agencies have with elected officials? Or do you not trust your agencies to do that, or to make decisions on which meetings they should hold?
Again, council member, respectfully, I disagree with your interpretation of this process. We are in constant communication with our agency leaders and partners, and we believe that this is an effective way to improve access to city agencies for all elected officials from every level of government, city, state, and federal, and we've implemented this to more efficiently and effectively utilize and deploy city resources.
But I'd love if you can answer the question. Why not just have agencies report back to you on what meetings they have with elected officials? Why not do it in reverse? That's how it's always been done.
We communicate
over many mayoralities.
We do that, and more so. We communicate with our city agencies and leaders all the time.
But you've created a process that reverses it and creates the bottleneck and the approval process at City Hall, so you decide which agency meetings happen.
There have been no bottlenecks.
But I think
just what your opinion is.
As we've heard from colleagues, we had a colleague who requested to have an agency head come out for a tour. The agency head wanted to come out for the tour of their district. City Hall denied it. City Hall rejected it, is what we've been told by the council member. And that they said another agency mid-level staffer should go out instead, despite the agency head, who has a charter-mandated authority to make that decision for herself, and despite the charter-mandated authority of the agency head to work with elected officials, City Hall intervened and said, no, some mid-level staffer can go out and do this instead. How is that not a denial?
I appreciate your feedback, but your interpretation is not accurate, so we'll just agree to disagree.
I just wish you would answer the questions. As you know, we sent a letter from 65 city, state, and federal elected officials asking you to reverse this policy. Has it changed your opinion at all? What would it take for you to consider reversing this policy? If 100 elected officials asked you to reverse it, we're the ones who are impacted by it. We're the ones who understand how it negatively undermines our ability to do our jobs and fight and serve for our constituents. Is this 65 elected officials across city, state, and federal government, is their opposition to this policy, their request for reversal, encouraging you to change your mind?
Mayor Adams implemented this policy because he believes that is the best tool that we have at this time to effectively deploy city services. And I encourage you and any of your colleagues here today to reach out to him, to speak with him directly about any concerns that you may have if you feel like the answers that I'm providing you today are insufficient.
So it doesn't matter if every elected official in the city of New York, except for Councilmember Palladino, opposes this policy. If every city, state, and federal elected official were to tell you that they think this makes zero sense and this undermines our ability to do our job, you and Mayor Adams are just going full steam ahead anyway. You do not care.
My personal opinion is not relevant here. And so if you have questions...
Did you propose this policy to the mayor?
Excuse me?
Did you propose the creation of this policy to the mayor? Whose idea was it?
This is a policy that Mayor Adams implemented.
Did you propose it to the mayor? It's just a yes or no question.
No, I did not propose it.
So this was not your idea?
This was not my idea.
Okay. It wasn't my understanding. But we hope that you'll start to listen to the elected officials who represent our community, who represent the communities and know best about how we can fight for and serve our constituents. I'd just like to ask, in our final few minutes, how many city officials are subject to this policy? Do you know how many thousands of workers have to have their meeting requests reviewed by you and the mayor? Any estimate?
I can get back to you with a specific number.
Is it all
if you'd
people
like.
on the substantial policymaker list?
It's senior agency leaders.
Okay, so senior agency leaders, if we were to take the substantial policymaker list as a floor, the conflicts of interest board substantial policymaker list that every agency submits to COIB as the senior agency leaders who have policymaking authority, that's 2,500 people. That doesn't include your 77 precinct commanders or 250 firehouse leaders that you told Councilmember Gutierrez were also subject to this. So we're upwards of just off, I don't imagine you have a comprehensive list of who's subject to this, do you? Do you have a comprehensive list of which city officials?
I can get back to you with that information.
Could you provide that to us in writing of exactly which city officials are subject to this?
We can get you a list.
But it sounds like upwards of at least 3,000 people are subject to this. So any meeting requests with any of 3,000 people are supposed to go to you and the mayor for review and approval.
That number sounds a little high.
20,
as I said, I'm not going to make assumptions here, and I can get back to you with that information.
Okay, I'd just like to ask a couple other questions. As far as we could tell, there's no data security on this form. Are there any protocols that you have put in place with OTI to ensure the confidentiality of this information?
The Chief Counsel, Lisa Zornberg, as I mentioned earlier, is working with OTI on those matters.
Okay, but I just would be concerned there's sensitive information that's included in these requests, and it doesn't appear that there's any data security policies in place. The form that, do you know who decided which agencies were included on the list of meeting requests? Like who put together the list of which agencies I have to go through this form to meet with?
I don't understand the question. It's a citywide policy.
But you included on this form library systems. You included on this form the Campaign Finance Board, series of non-mayoral agencies that are not subject to your decisions.
If you go back to the form now, those agencies, I believe, are no longer listed.
They've been removed. Okay,
Yes.
great. That's good to hear. I'd like to just ask a question about kind of what issues are subject to this form and what are not. One of the categories on here is enforcement. So if it's an enforcement-related issue, we're supposed to go through this form.
An example of an enforcement issue might be wanting to go out with a sheriff to engage in enforcement on an illegal marijuana shop.
If a tenant has an enforcement issue that they need help from HPD
That
to
sounds
inspect,
like, no.
that's not enforcement?
I've said very clearly, constituent matters, which is what that would fall under, are not subject to this process.
I just want to be very clear.
And
Every single issue I raise with
always-
city agencies, every single issue we all raise with city agencies are on behalf of our constituents. I don't know how to define what a constituent matter is. Everything I'm doing is fighting for my constituents and doing my absolute best to advocate for their interests. So when you tell me constituent matters are not subject to this form, nothing would be subject to this form if that's in fact what you're trying to say.
Well, council member, I'd be happy to go through this in greater detail.
Okay.
If you have some
And
more specific examples you want to share.
A tenant who has an enforcement issue with HPD, buildings,
no,
construction
we've-
issue
we've
with
made it
DOB.
clear that
Nothing. None of those issues. No
Exactly.
enforcement. But if a sheriff has an enforcement issue, that would be subject, but no other enforcement issues
That
would
is
be?
a deployment of city services to a particular district.
And I just want to remind you, Ms. Raspberry, since you're under oath today, libraries, CFB, COIB are all still on the online form. None of them are mayoral agencies. We've just checked and
I
confirmed.
see. Well, thank you for letting us know.
Yeah.
I've requested, my team and I requested to have those removed. So if they're still there, thank you for pointing it out. We will work with OTI to make sure that they're removed.
I want to be respectful that you modified your calendar to stay with us till 3 o'clock. I do really appreciate you coming in and engaging in a back and forth and a conversation and being willing to testify. You were the person that we hoped to have come before us today, and you were willing to make yourself available. We appreciate it. I just want to close by saying 65 elected officials have made direct, as clear as possible to the mayor and to you and the whole team that this policy doesn't work. The speaker, 35 members of the city council, dozens of state legislators, members of Congress have said plainly, directly, this policy doesn't work. This is an absolutely problematic policy that undermines our ability to do our jobs. And we're requesting that this policy immediately be reversed because it doesn't make sense. Thank you for joining us today, and we look forward to hearing back from you on some of the items that we raised that you said you'd circle back on. In particular, we'd like to follow up with legal representation from the mayor's office to understand the analysis of how, in fact, this policy is not in direct conflict with the city charter.
Thank you. And just on the letter, I appreciate you sharing that with us. And it's our intention to work so that we can demonstrate to you and all of your elected official colleagues in government that signed the letter to demonstrate how this tool will be an effective use for government and will, in fact, accomplish our goals, which are to deploy city services in an efficient and streamlined manner. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Raspberry. Have a nice day. We're going to have a next panel of witnesses after folks clear out, so we'll give folks a minute.
Thank you.
Let's do it. Oh, I got to read something. I'd now like to open the hearing for public testimony. I remind members of the public that this is a formal governmental proceeding and that decorum shall be observed at all times. As such, members of the public shall remain silent at all times. The witness table is reserved for people who wish to testify. No video recording or photography is allowed from the witness table.
You guys can keep talking.
Further, members of the public may not present audio or video recordings as testimony, but may submit transcripts of such recordings to the Sergeant-at-Arms for inclusion in the hearing record. If you wish to speak at today's hearing, please fill out an appearance card with the Sergeant-at-Arms and wait to be recognized. When recognized, you will have 3 minutes to speak on today's hearing topic, the elected official agency engagement request form. I didn't realize that was the name. If you have written statement or additional written testimony you wish to submit for the record, please provide a copy of the testimony to the Sergeant-at-Arms. You may also email written testimony to testimony@council.nysc.gov within 72 hours of this hearing. Audio and video recordings will not be accepted. Once again, and for those of you who are testifying in person and register in advance, please fill out an appearance card with the Sergeant-at-Arms. Panelists on Zoom, once your name is called, a member of our staff will unmute you and the Sergeant-at-Arms to give you the go-ahead to begin. Upon setting the timer, please wait for the Sergeant-at-Arms to announce that you may begin before delivering your testimony. It is now my great honor and privilege to introduce our first speaker, the Honorable Ruth Messinger. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Council member, can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. I want to say this has been the most impressive hearing to listen to. I think you and your colleagues and the public advocate have been amazingly clear. I feel sorry for the administration's effort to present this as logical because it's not logical. So let me just give you my 3 minutes of thought and then see if there are any questions. From my point of view, and I've been in government, was in government for a long time and have stayed connected to government, although Councilmember Brewer has all of us beat. But from my point of view, this is a distressing requirement because it's certainly bad for every elected official. It's bad for the constituents of those elected officials. And in my judgment, it's very bad for the city and for its delivery of services. What matters in this very large city and what helps it to be human is relationships. And I think there is no one who knows that better than the mayor. His style prioritizes relationships. He takes personal phone calls. He lets people stop him on the street and feel like they've actually spoken to their government. He ought to understand, especially since he was a non-mayoral elected official representing the borough of Brooklyn, that elected officials thrive on these kinds of relationships with their constituents. They thrive on being elected to make a difference, and they thrive on being able to make a difference, partly because they develop capacity to get quickly to people in charge, often on issues, as several of you have pointed out, that are harrowingly immediate. I'm dealing most frequently now with the status of immigrants and asylum seekers whose children are being taken out of school. Intervening literally at the minute, reaching the right person, and being able to get a response protects that child and that family from additional trauma. It is the strength of the elected officials in this city, and they are fantastic, that they know whom to reach out to and when to reach out, and they can do that in the moment in a way that actually produces results in a hugely large city with an incredible number of agencies and personnel. The mayor, in my judgment, is disrupting the quality relationships that help move this city along. And apparently, and this is sad to say, that his reasoning is that only he can be the quick responser and the miracle maker, and that nobody else can have that status or that role. That's incredibly destructive of the charter, of the intention of the people who shape city government, and it's intentionally destructive of what we have going for us, which we all know doesn't work nearly as well as we'd like to, but works better partly because of these relationships and these connections. I guess I would like to make a few other points before I stop, and that is all of you, are our elected officials. We as the public pay your salaries, and because of a campaign finance law that I had something to do with, we help you to get elected using our tax dollars to put you in place. And a reasonable return on investment of that use of our tax dollars is to be able to get the kind of responses that most elected officials in this city, regardless of party, deliver over and over again for their constituents. So my hope is that the way things are will continue to be the way things are, and that, as several of you have suggested, it ought to be on the burden on the agencies to record meetings with elected officials if that's of interest to the administration. Thank you for allowing me to testify, Council Member.
Ms. Messenger, can I ask just one question?
Sure.
Can you share from your historical perspective of working with different administrations, as borough president, et cetera, running for mayor, can you recall a mayor doing anything like this in the past?
Actually, the answer is a great question, Council Member, because the answer is no, except almost as a joke. So some of you who are terribly old might remember that I regularly disagreed with Ed Koch on issues of policy. And for various reasons, I was one of the people willing to disagree with him in public. And he would regularly say, sometimes publicly, sometimes to me, and I know sometimes to his deputy mayors and commissioners, well, let's just not do any work in her district. But it was always said as a joke. It was his understanding that whatever we disagreed with on policy, I still needed the garbage on the west side picked up. I still needed protection for the schools. And he knew that I would call, and he knew that starting with his first deputy mayor, Nat Leventhal, down to his commissioners, would respond to me as a concerned and informed elected official. So your question is great because it was sort of a joke during the Koch administration, but it never was more than a joke because he knew that I had to do my job and he had to do his job. And part of that was disagreeing with each other on policy. And part of that was using the network, the complex network that is a mayoral administration in New York to be sure that we got things done.
Great. That is really helpful. Even the height of the Giuliani administration, we never saw policies like this. It's really quite something. Thank you so much for taking the time to testify. I know you have. I'm going
to add one sentence. As some of you know, I do a lot of work. I do a lot of work on a lot of issues. I do some of that work in and of and for the Jewish community in New York. The mayor prides himself on being a man of faith. And so I would just like on the record here to call out to the mayor that the biggest lesson, he knows this for a fact, the biggest lesson that Moses learned from Jethro, his father-in-law, was that he couldn't do it all alone.
Thank you so much, Ms. Messenger. Thank you for making the time to testify and sharing your exceptionally helpful insights. Really, really appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you. Have a wonderful afternoon. It's now my privilege to call up our next panel, which includes former council member Rosie Mendez and Nick Gulota. I think I misspelled Gulota. There we go. I'm working on it, Nick. Thank you both for being with us today.
Good afternoon, Chair Ressler. It's very nice to be back in this house in this capacity. My name is Rosie Mendez, and I have worked in local government for 21 years, 12 years as a council member, 4 years as the chief of staff to my predecessor, Margarita Lopez, 3 years as director of community affairs for the great and now then Manhattan Borough President Gail Brewer, and now council member again. And I'm currently a director of policy and legislation for public advocate Jumaane Williams. In the interest of disclosure, I am off the clock and I'm exercising my First Amendment right. So just in case Tiffany hears this later. So as the chief of staff, I reached out to borough commissioners on a frequent basis, agency directors or intergovernmental staff, to discuss and resolve constituent and district-wide problems. And I would only call up commissioners or their staff to set up a meeting with a commissioner when the councilwoman actually wanted to meet with the commissioner. It is in that capacity that I advanced and resolved the issues of the district and Council District 2. As the councilwoman for Council District 2, I would meet with commissioners and chairs of commissions such as Landmarks Preservation Commission, the City Planning Commission, and the School Construction Authority on a regular basis. Those meetings focused on group constituent matters, proposed designations of landmark status for buildings and historic districts, proposed rezonings, as well as alignment on capital allocations and status updates. I frequently met with Parks Department, HPD, DCLA, NYCHA, and the School Construction Authority to advance capital issues and or those district-wide problems. At the Manhattan Borough President's office, I would contact anyone who Gail told me that I should contact. But in that capacity as Director of Community Affairs, most of my discussions were with oath because I oversaw all the work of staff with the community boards, and there were inevitably always issues and conflicts, and we ended up going to oath a couple of times to try to resolve them. Also with OMB, because Gail had us be note takers for when the district managers met with OMB to put their budget priorities together. In my current capacity, I've attended meetings and been invited to meetings with commissioners and executive leadership to discuss the public advocates' bills. Those meetings were usually organized by the New York City Council or by the admin. I'm gonna...
Take your time.
Okay, is that all right? Thank you. Or by the administration. And sometimes those meetings were fruitful, sometimes they were not. I'll get into the How Many Stops Act later. I first learned about Mayor Adams' intention to require elected officials to request permission with executive and agency leadership through what is a multi-page online form from New York One. I immediately contacted people in our office, in the Public Advocate's Office, because I thought this was a very dangerous precedent, and that it would limit the council and the Public Advocate's oversight as the legislative branch to balance and check the executive branch, the mayor's office, the administration. The authority and the powers of the New York City legislators is granted through the New York City Charter, the New York State Statute of Local Governance, and the Municipal Home Rule Law. The doctrine of separation of powers was intended and reinforced by the 1989 Charter Revision Commission, which expanded the powers of the council. That commission was headed by the chair, Frederick A.O. Schwartz Jr., and executive director, Eric Lane. A main goal of 1989 Charter Commission was to make the council a co-equal partner in governing the city. And in a New York Law School Law Review article in 1999 written by Schwartz and Lane, they wrote that for a legislature to balance and check the executive branch is the American norm. So among the goals written in a report pursuant to the Charter Commission of 1989, it states in that report two things which I find important: that these goals were to achieve a more classical legislative and executive mode of government with the opportunity for expanded policy debate in the legislative branch, increased efficiency in the executive branch, and the corresponding check and balances that generally attend such a system, as well as to provide for additional decentralization in decision-making to address the alienation experienced by residents of this great city. As a former council member, I am concerned about what happened here today, right? And what's happened to me when I used to chair hearings. What will the process be when agency staff states on the record at an oversight hearing that they are going to get back to you? Do we have to fill out a form for that? What happens when they don't get back to you? Do you have to fill out a form for that to get the answers that they were supposed to bring to the hearing? I'll go into some specifics maybe after his testimony, unless you want me to. But the How Many Stops Act and the issues they've raised, I feel is very misguided. The How Many Stops Act is a drop-down menu. What was in contention was not level 2, 3, and 4 stops, it was level 1. And level 1 would take seconds, and it was a drop-down menu. This multi-page form, I went in there, it's not a drop-down. Well, there are some drop-down menus, but it's not all drop-down menus. And you can't go on to the next page and complete the form if you don't answer every question. So that, to me, is problematic. It's more than seconds, it's minutes. That was asking police officers to report on what they did during these certain stops after the fact. It was not telling police officers to fill out a form to make a stop. You know, so requiring the legislators to fill out a form is infringing on the rights of the legislators to do your charter mandated right of oversight. There's a couple of things that Tiffany Raspberry said, and I will state that I was very disappointed that she was the only one here. I've been at hearings where there are multiple people that will answer the questions. Why wasn't the general counsel here? Why weren't other people here who could answer the questions? And more so, if they couldn't come, why didn't Tiffany get those answers? You know, you would think you would anticipate these questions and come back prepared to answer them. Instead, now you gotta wait and possibly fill out a form to get those answers. You know, she said that some council members have greater access than others, so this, I guess, levels the playing field. Well, are those council members who don't have access, have they complained? What was the reason to do a form besides everyone being at the whim and mercy of the mayor for him to decide whether a meeting would be given? Unclear. She mentioned that a council member, a new council member filled out the form who was unfamiliar with process. Well, the council member needed to make certain decisions to complete that form of who they wanted to meet with. Otherwise, they wouldn't have been able to complete the form and get a meeting if the admin decided it was worth giving them a meeting. I think this is really an issue also of transparency, because we don't know if meetings are getting turned down. When are people being informed? How are they being informed? Within what time frame? And the reason why? We're not getting any of that. There is nothing in that form that says they reserve the right to decline any meetings. That's it. So that is very problematic. I have to say, you know, that, I am a lawyer. Worked at Legal Services. I was a tenant organizer and also a public interest coordinator at Rutgers School of Law, Newark, my alma mater. And so I looked at a couple of law review articles, one written by Schwartz and Lane, and the other one written by former members, former employees here, Liz Fine and Jim Karras, who were general counsel and deputy general counsel some years back, and they wrote an article for the New York Law School Law Review on how the functions and separations of powers were working 25 years after the 1989 charter revision. And I think those are very important articles. So it's been 35 years since the City Council expanded its powers. There's never been a need for a form. We are now in the third year of the mayor's first term, and now he decides that a form is needed. They roll it out very quickly with lots of mistakes, like having not the right agencies in there. But when the city became 5 boroughs, and it was a board of aldermen then, and they created the City of New York. We were governed by the Greater New York Charter, and I don't know that for 127 years there's been any issues or any meeting request form. So it really begs the question of why it's needed now. In closing, what I want to say is that the requirement for filling out this multi-page online form to obtain a meeting that may be declined at the whim of the administration will interfere with the efficacy of resolving constituent matters and district issues while infringing on the separation of powers doctrine and with the responsibilities of local legislators to conduct their charter mandate of oversight. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that exceptionally eloquent testimony. Now, Mr. Gulota.
Thank you, Chair Ressler, for inviting me to testify on this important topic. My name is Nick Gulota, and I presently have the privilege of serving in city government, though, like Councilmember Mendez, I am here in my personal capacity, not representing any elected official today, and on my own time. I also teach on public policy and public service at the City College of New York to our next generation of our city's public servants. And I'm here today to offer a unique perspective from about 12 years of working in city council offices and also having served in City Hall's Intergovernmental Affairs Division with you, Councilmember Ressler, and many of our other colleagues. And I also worked for a number of years in the Mayor's Office of Immigrant Affairs, working with elected officials and community organizations, and want to share those experiences. It's critical that we understand first and foremost that New Yorkers primarily come to elected officials' offices because government has failed them. They've faced barriers, language barriers in others. They've experienced injustices. Their situations are urgent and complex. Because agencies have been unable to resolve their problems, they come to elected officials' offices. When I was part of City Hall's Intergovernmental Affairs team, I was responsible for day-to-day work with city, state, and federal elected officials, particularly in the borough of Queens. And similarly at the Mayor's Office of Immigrant Affairs, we work daily with those same elected officials. Work to address complex and nuanced and important issues. And everything, as the great Ruth Messenger shared, came down to relationships and being accessible, being reachable in a very human way. I couldn't have never imagined asking a council member from a co-equal branch of government to fill out a form to have a meeting. I would have never told Senator Comrie, for example, we're not going to meet with OMB, or if you want to meet with OMB to discuss why Jamaica Hospital can't get capital funding, fill out a form. Or, Councilmember Danny Drum would call me and my commissioner sometimes, and on a Tuesday he would make a request saying, there are tenants in Jackson Heights who are being discriminated against because of their immigration status, and on Wednesday we'd have a multi-agency press conference in his district, cutting across multiple levels of our city agencies and bringing multiple agencies to the table. Councilmember Gutierrez, in her former position, could call me and discuss the dynamics of evictions that are going on in Ridgewood and ask for services to build events and a long-term plan from the administration to deal with a long-standing issue, and we could do that in a way that was fundamentally human, responsive, where we could dive into nuances. May I continue? And ultimately successful in our work in trying to address those issues because we had those open lines of communication. Can give other examples. Councilmember Menchaca, I remember, called me and my commissioner one day an impromptu meeting to address protocols for supporting families who had experienced ICE raids in Sunset Park. And those are the type of things you can't put in a forum and explain and submit and hope for a response for. Forcing this type of communication to be submitted through a forum, as I mentioned, would have been impossible. These are not conversations that you ultimately put into a forum. And I think what's really obvious is that anyone who's worked in intergovernmental affairs before can tell you what this is about. This is about commodifying the work of government and our agencies so that it can be leveraged by the admin, plain and simple. New Yorkers didn't elect this mayor to dole out high-level attention to some issues because of who is requesting them and ignore others. It's wrong for this administration. It frankly would have been wrong for the previous administration, and it will be wrong for the next one if they were to have this process. City government already has, as you noted, existing systems for tracking requests from elected officials. City Hall already has city, state, and federal-led teams who speak regularly with elected officials about their priorities and requests. As you noted, deputy mayor's offices also collect this information, and from the agencies that they cover, that's just good government. Finally, I just want to say that, personally, I've worked across 3 mayoral administrations, and I've never seen this level of dysfunctionality that we experience today. The public advocate spoke a little bit about this as well. And I think as New Yorkers, we deserve an efficient and effective government that can actually get things done and not more red tape and barriers. Thank you, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you both so much. I just want to ask a little bit about, maybe I'll ask Nick a question first. In your roles in intergovernmental affairs and Mayor's Office of Immigrant Affairs, did you ever consider the ideology or the relationship of the elected official with the administration in your responsiveness to their concerns or complaints? Like, how did you balance that and, make sure to, ensure responsiveness to the people who had concerns?
Yeah, I really appreciate the question. My experience is actually that there were a lot of elected officials for whom we, and I personally, didn't share any sort of ideology or similar beliefs in politics at all, who received a tremendous amount of attention because the issues that they flagged, that they brought to the attention of our team were so important. And it doesn't, it shouldn't matter who the messenger is, frankly. New Yorkers, like I said, don't elect a mayor to decide whether a commissioner should handle an issue or if they should be ignored and sort of pawned off to somebody else. At the end of the day, these are critical issues. I can give a few examples if that would be helpful. In Rockaway, I learned a fair amount about beach erosion and had to deal with a number of stakeholders who I may not have shared a similar, maybe even one similar belief with, but other than maybe just having a good functional government. But that shouldn't matter. We worked on that issue, spent a tremendous amount of time trying to address the impacts of climate change in that area and trying to make sure we had a resilient, shorefront. I can think of many elected officials for whom, were very critical of the previous mayor's agenda, whether it was around immigrant rights or other things, who we nonetheless worked with. And so I would just put out there that I think that this process politicizes a lot of those just good work of government tasks.
Thank you. And Councilmember Mendez, you spoke insightfully about the '89 Charter Revision Commission, and you've experienced city government from multiple sides, public advocate, president, council member, staff. How do you think this policy, or do you think this policy kind of shifts balance of power between the legislative and executive branches, and are you concerned about that?
Absolutely. I think it does shift the power. I think, I think it's unlawful, although, that's not for me to decide, and that's not for the mayor to decide. That would be for a judge to decide, if he continues with this policy. But, I heard of a council member who was not invited to an event in the district, and the mayor said, basically something to the effect of, and next time you'll think twice before overriding a veto. This had to do with the How Many Stops Act. So, it's interesting to me that this is happening now, and I think it's because, he wants to micromanage and determine who gets meetings and maybe make certain council members ineffective because they won't grant the meetings, or they'll take forever to grant the meeting. I really don't see an upside about this form. And if they, and he vetoed the How Many Stops Act, right? And so he didn't think that those extra few minutes were, or seconds, right, were worthy of being documented and reporting. But in this case, then, like if I was an elected official and I was told to do a report after the fact of what commissioners I met with and how was, the services, I would do it. But like you asked, why can't his own commissioners do it? Because the question is not on how many stops acts. Again, it's after the fact. And what he's doing is he's putting the brakes before the facts and before we could all do what we're supposed to do, including him, which is service the people of this city.
I really want to thank you both for taking the time to be with us today and sharing your exceptionally helpful insights on the record for this hearing. It's really meaningful. Thank you both. Really. Have a wonderful afternoon.
Thank you, Chair Ressler.
Thank you. And it's now my great privilege to introduce our next panelist, our former public advocate, the Honorable Betsy Gottbaum. Thank you so much for being with us today. It's nice to see you. I do. I'll call him right after this. While I was sitting here.
Yeah, he knew that, but he was going to give you a hard time.
Fair enough.
But he did say to say hello.
Good.
Hi.
And
yeah.
if you just turn your mic, press the button in
Oh.
front of the micro. It's just the button at the bottom there. Perfect.
Yeah, the Techno disaster is sitting here. Hi. Should I just start? Is that? Go for it. Yeah. Good afternoon. Good afternoon, Chair Wessler and members of the City Council. I'm testifying as Executive Director of Citizens Union and former New York City Public Advocate, which I'm actually doing this more as a former New York City Public Advocate because that's where these kinds of issues came up all the time. And I feel very, very strongly about how important it is for elected officials to be able to communicate, talk to, ask questions of, ask immediate questions of the public, because I totally believe that we are elected to help people. And if you look carefully at the public advocate sort of duties in the charter, that's what the public advocate is, the ombudsman of the city of New York, which means people in trouble, people who need things, they call you, call the office. And to me, that was the most serious and the most important thing, practically the most important thing that we did. So I think this is unnecessary and unreasonable red tape that the mayor is proposing. And I really don't understand why requiring an elected official to submit a request form if they want to speak with a commissioner or a senior administrative staff, why that would better coordinate issues, things in the city. I couldn't think of any examples in my 8-year career as that, and previously other careers in city government, where that would be appropriate. So I do believe as public advocate, one of the things, because we so emphasized the importance of helping people who had no place else to turn, we were able to make meaningful changes to help special education students, families access food stamps, and children in the child welfare system, and more. And just a few examples. I remember one very, very cold February where people had called the office, people who lived in NYCHA, a NYCHA building, called and said the boiler was out and they had no heat. They had called 311, they had called this, they had called that, and nobody had done anything. So I called the commissioner. Guess what? The commissioner, even though it was night, the commissioner sent people up to fix the boiler. Well, that's what we're elected for. You know that, Lincoln. The other examples were there was a problem at a HRA welfare center. This was quite humiliating because I went and was not allowed to enter. That is very unusual. You know, you say who you are and they still don't let you enter. And I called the commissioner, and guess what? I entered. So that's the kind of thing. And there were many, many, I'm sorry.
Feel free to speak as long as you like.
There were many, many examples like that, why would it be better coordination at a time like that to fill out a form and give the form in to wherever you have to give it in. And how would you fix the problem then? And what's the point of doing the form? So I question I just had a chance to look over the mayor's statement, and I just question it. I don't get it. I don't understand why it would make things more efficient. It makes them much less efficient. And I'm sure my colleague Ruth Messenger probably said exactly the same thing. And so it's very important that we elected officials, when we're elected, that we have the access to immediately help people. Because if we don't have it, who's going to do it? And that goes completely with the city council, with each council member who, in their districts, that people rely on them, and for the citywides, and for everybody, for every elected official. That's what we're elected for. So I am obviously very opposed to this.
Thank you so much for that clear and compelling testimony. Can I just, this is perhaps an unfair question,
Sure.
but can you hypothesize what the rationale for this policy could be? Like, what do you think?
I'll tell you what I think, and I guess that I could be wrong about this, and this is what makes me really fear this policy, because I remember when the Giuliani administration, when Mark Green was trying to get similar issues done, like I did, the mayor Giuliani had apparently told his commissioners not to talk to Mark Green and not to do things for Mark Green, who was public advocate at the time. I cannot imagine that Eric Adams is doing that, because I know that he says this is the city of yes, which means we're there to help people. I just think it's kind of a misplaced error, and if it is to punish somebody that you don't agree with or that you don't like, which I think was the case in Giuliani's time, that's wrong. That's really wrong. That's not democratic, and it's not what we're here for. And I think the council knows that. I know it. All my colleagues and friends, when I was public advocate, knew that. And we worked very, very hard to do that. By the way, I've also heard that most of the commissioners could have cared less that they were told not to help, and they did it anyway.
And you took the step, I think it was last week, of writing a letter to the editor in the Daily News expressing your concern, opposition to this policy. I imagine with your long and distinguished history in local government, that you've engaged with former senior officials, former elected officials. Have you heard from anyone that thinks this policy makes sense or could be beneficial?
No, quite the contrary. I've gotten many compliments about the letter, and everybody says it's ridiculous. It makes no sense. And I've heard that, frankly, from a lot of my friends in the administration.
Unfortunately, I have too. Anything else you'd like to add today?
No, I just feel that I would not give to the mayor bad motives for doing this. I just think they may be a little bit misplaced, and I just hope that those of us who've had the experience and the knowledge of how important it is to New Yorkers to get things done and help them when they need help, that he understands how important it is.
I could not agree with you more. No, I could not agree with you more. You know, we sent a letter from 65 elected officials this morning to the mayor, city, state, and federal elected officials, asking him to reverse this policy. I hope that he's listening to seasoned, senior, experienced government officials like yourself, Ms. Messenger, Ms. Mendez, and others, and really considers reversing it and doing so post haste, because I'm very concerned about the harm that it could impose on our ability to do our job.
Yeah, absolutely right. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for taking the time. It's great to have you back at the City Council.
Very different to be here. Things have changed.
Well, hopefully we'll have more opportunities for you to testify in the very near future.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing your expertise. We really appreciate it. And our next and final panel is Miss Indiana Alba and Mr. Christopher Leon Johnson. We will first unmute Miss Indiana Alba, and if Mr. Leon Johnson's still here, feel free to join us. Okay, Miss Indiana Alba, you have 2 minutes.
You may begin.
If we have inadvertently missed anyone who is registered to testify today and has yet to have been called, please use the Zoom hand function, and you'll be called to in that order that your hand has been raised. I just want to thank everyone for making the time to join us today. Really greatly appreciate it. And with that, we will adjourn this hearing.